Good day, folks. My name is Sean, and this is Air Photography. This is my 30-day review of the DJI Air 2S. I've made several videos on this drone over the past 30 days, but I haven't actually done a review on it yet. And the reason being is I wanted to spend a good amount of time flying it and testing it out before I form any type of opinion. Now, in reality, when I purchased this drone and going into this review, I knew this was going to be a pretty solid drone. The original Air 2S was probably one of my favorite drones of all time. It was my go-to drone all last summer. And really what DJI has just done here, they've taken an already great drone and just made it even better with some new improvements, a better camera, and some new features and enhancements. Now, this review is not going to be overly technical where we're going over all the specs. I've already made a few videos about that, everything that is new with this drone, and there are a ton of videos about that already on YouTube. This review is just going to be more about my user experience and what I think about some of the new features, and talk about some of the negatives that have been introduced. But just a quick recap here, if you aren't quite aware, basically the main upgrades on this drone is it now has a 1-inch sensor compared to the half-inch sensor that was on the original Air 2. It now has a bitrate of 150, and it can shoot in 5.4K. So the camera has really been upgraded on this new model. On top of that, it now has OcuSync 3.0, or what DJI is now calling O3. With it, you're going to get a little bit more reliable of a signal, better penetration, and a little bit farther distance. OcuSync 2.0 I think was rated at 10 kilometers, and OcuSync 3.0 is rated at 12 kilometers. Now, before we get too far here, let's talk about the elephant in the room with this new drone, and that is visible props in your shots. Now, with this new camera upgrade, they also increased the field of view. They went from 84 degrees to 88 degrees. So the increased field of view, probably with some other factors, you can now sometimes get props in your shots. And it is actually quite surprising. DJI has been making drones for quite some time, and they're pretty well the leader when it comes to consumer drones. So you think that would be something that they would have kind of found during their testing process and maybe adjusted it. Now, I'm not an engineer by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's a combination of having that extra field of view and perhaps that they stuck this new larger camera on the existing body of the Mavic Air. I'm wondering with this larger camera and wider field of view if a redesign would have been in order to prevent that from happening, or perhaps the camera needed to be lowered down a little bit. Either way, I'm actually quite shocked that DJI let that get through quality control. Now again, not being an engineer, I don't really know if that's something that they can fix with firmware. If it's a design flaw, then we're kind of stuck with that. Hopefully they can do some tweaking with the way the gimbal handles the movement of the drone, and perhaps they can fix that issue. Now, as mentioned, it's not something that happens all the time. I've done about 25 to 30 flights with this drone so far, and there's only been a handful of times where I see the props. And when you see the props, it's only for a split second. It's not like they're always in the shot. And again, it depends on the weather. If it's a really windy day and the drone is being a little bit more aggressive up in the air to keep it stable, that's when you're really going to notice the props. Now, if you're a person who likes to use the master shots, that new intelligent flight mode where you can get some pretty interesting results, that was notorious for having props in the shots as well. Now, I made a video a couple weeks ago going over how you can get rid of that. There's actually a setting when you launch the DJI Fly app where you can go in and have it set to composition or for obstacle avoidance. And when you set it to composition, it's going to put the priority to, making a nice video. When you have obstacle avoidance, the drone is going to be moving a little bit differently, and that's where you're going to get the props in the shot. So you have the option there. If you need obstacle avoidance, you can leave that on. Or if you're more focused on getting good shots, then you can enable that as well. Now, moving on here, as mentioned at the beginning of this video, the original Mavic Air 2 was probably one of my favorite drones of all time. For the last year, it was my go-to drone. I pretty well took it everywhere I went. It's nice, small, and compact, and I just really enjoy flying it. But now with the introduction of this nice new camera, you kind of get the best of both worlds. You get a nice 1-inch sensor and a nice, small, compact drone. So between the new camera and the upward obstacle avoidance, which allows the drone to fly faster, this is going to be definitely my go-to drone this summer coming up. I've been really impressed with the quality of the video. The 5.4K footage is quite impressive, and no matter whether you want to capture just everything in auto or you want to put it into something like D-Log so you can get 10-bit color and do your own grading. If you're a person who edits on an iPad like I do, the 5.4K is a little bit of a pain because you kind of gotta jump through some hoops to be able to edit it and export it, but I'm pretty sure that will be a problem of the past here coming up soon. But definitely that 5.4K video is nice. The other thing I really like what DJI has done with this drone and the Fly app is how you adjust your manual settings. They now call it Pro Mode, and what you can do is go in and set each individual component to either auto or manual. So if you want everything else left in auto, but you want to be able to adjust your ISO, you can now do so. The new zoom capabilities are pretty nice as well. Now, it's not something I really use a lot because you do lose a bit of quality when you're zooming in. But for those times when you do want to get a little bit closer to the action and still remain a good distance, you're able to do so. You can do 8x zoom when in 1080, and you can do 4x zoom when in 4K. Now, a couple interesting things to note about the DJI Air 2S is that the operating temperature has been changed for this new model. The original Air 2 could handle temperatures all the way down to -10 degrees Celsius, but with this new model, they've changed that now to 0 degrees Celsius. So there's a 10-degree difference there on which it can fly. Now, with that said, one of the nice things about the release timing of this drone this year is that it was released in early spring here in Canada. The temperature this time of year can really swing all over the place. It can be really hot one day, almost like summertime temperatures, and we can get below freezing and snowstorms. So in that case, it's actually worked out quite well because I've been able to test this drone in many different temperatures. I've been able to fly it in temperatures as low as -7 degrees, and I've been actually able to fly it in temperatures as high as 28 degrees Celsius. So we're talking some pretty big temperature influxes there. But that's what it's kind of like here springtime in Ontario. You could be wearing a parka and toque in the morning and shorts and t-shirt in the afternoon. And I must say it's handled beautifully in all the temperatures. The footage is great. One thing I have noticed with some drones, when you start to get really cold temperatures, the gimbal gets really stiff and you can get some jitter in the video, jello I guess you could call it. But with the Air 2 I didn't notice any of that. The footage that I shot in those cold temperatures, and there's some snow on the ground, the gimbal stayed nice and smooth and I didn't notice any jitter or jello in the footage. Now, it was nice that DJI did add support for the smart controller when this was launched on day one. They did release a firmware update to make it compatible. But the flight experience is not quite as good on the smart controller as it is with the stock controller in a smartphone. You'll notice that the video feed gets a little bit laggy, and just from my own experience, I find the range is not as good. And it's very unfortunate because, the smart controller did cost a lot of money, but I think we're pretty well at its end of life. I don't know going forward if they're going to make it compatible with many more drones. The problem with it is that the hardware inside is pretty out of date, so it is very unfortunate, but if you do want to fly your Air 2S with the smart controller, you are definitely able to do so. Another kind of negative thing, and it's not really so much of a negative, but more of different, and that is it doesn't support HDR just by having an HDR video mode. If you want to capture high dynamic range video, you have to use that HDL mode, and then from there you're going to have to bring it into some form of editor and edit the HDR yourself. So that's a little bit unfortunate because a lot of people I know like that feature, including myself. I have actually used it quite a bit in the past. Now lastly here, this is not a negative because this was just rumor. It was never really confirmed by DJI. Unfortunately, like many of us had hoped, it's not compatible with the DJI FPV goggles or the motion controller. There was a lot of rumors swirling around that it would be. In fact, many of the testers did confirm that it was there in the beta firmware, but they pulled it shortly before release, before the final firmware. I'm pretty confident that that support will come down the road. Whatever reason DJI decided to pull it at last minute, I'm not sure. Maybe if there was a bug that was found, or perhaps it was a stock issue. They didn't have enough stock of the goggles and motion controller to meet the demand that they knew they would have. And alternatively, it may not come at all. For whatever reason, maybe they've decided that it's just not viable. So definitely that is unfortunate, and hopefully they do add compatibility down the road. So all in all, this is one incredible piece of hardware. DJI has really outdone themselves. It is a little bit unfortunate about the props, but hopefully that can be addressed. But definitely this is going to be the drone that I fly all summer. It's just a nice mix of being compact and portable, excellent quality video. The video is superb, especially with that 1-inch sensor. You get the nice highlights and lowlights, good dynamic range. If you're a person who likes to fly in the evening, capturing sunsets or even sunrises, this is definitely a drone that you want to consider. If you are in the market for a new drone, perhaps your first drone, or maybe you want to upgrade from something like the DJI Mini or the Mini 2, definitely I highly recommend this drone. Now, one thing you do have to keep in mind, especially here in Canada, this is over 250 grams, so if you do purchase a drone like this, you will have to get your basic pilot certificate, and you will have to register it with Transport Canada. Many other countries around the world have similar regulations when it comes to drones over 250 grams, so make sure you just do your research first. I want to thank you for watching this video. Give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it and got some value out of it. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos, and we'll see you in the next one.